Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome in Monday afternoon, new week, new episode. I'm Jesse Montano. Going to be joined by Meghan Angley here in just a minute for Gorilla Sports Off Ice. As always, though, want to start off by reminding you guys about our great partners over at Trusted American Mortgage. Head on over to trustedamerican.com right now. They want to help you lower your interest rate, get a better monthly payment, and what better time of year to put some extra money in your pocket than summertime. Take a vacation. Head on over trustedamerican.com. See how much money they can help you start saving today. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome in Monday afternoon. Jesse Montano, Meghan Angley. This is Gorilla Sports Off Ice. Kicking off a new week of the offseason here, Meghan. We are definitely in the doldrums of the offseason. Not a lot going on. But that doesn't mean that you and I don't have stuff going on in our lives. How are you doing? Looked like you had a fun weekend.
Yes, my friend celebrated her birthday and she did an at-home hibachi event. So she had these people come out and do this dinner, and so they were squirting sake into everyone's mouth. There were water guns, there were all different types of bottles. The food was delicious. It was very sunny, very hot, but it was a really fun birthday. And this friend always honestly has the best events planned for her.
My sister did that a couple years ago, my oldest sister, and it's like, to that point, the people who do those types of things, it's like, you always have grand events.
It was super fun. I'm trying to think of, like, one year we did the bike bars, and I know those are pretty basic, but the theme was to dress like something that was the first letter of her name, and she's Alex. So I was an angel, but there were a lot of interpretations of characters and things to dress up as that begin with the letter A.
I did love the way me was an angel, obviously, but other people dressed up. Meghan, we got, like I said, we're into the offseason here, but we got plenty to talk about. We had a really fun opportunity this past weekend. For the second year in a row, we got to hang out with Walter Cup champion, two-time Olympic medalist, and Colorado native Nicole Hensley. She had her day with the Cup. So that was really fun. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the PWHL and expansion and just some of what's going on over in the P-Dub. Another hire for the Colorado Eagles today, but we're also going to run through just some of the offseason changes we've seen there, what to maybe expect for them. And then the bulk of our show, Meghan, we are going to talk about, we're going to start a two-part series here. The first part is going to be over the next couple of episodes. We're going to deep dive a little bit into where the Avs stand specifically on their roster right now. We're going to start today with defense. We're going to talk about goaltending and then forwards. And then right before training camp, we will do it all again with where everything has settled. Once the Avs are done with all their business, getting ready to head into the season, we will revisit everything by position again. But we're going to kick off part one of this deep dive series today by talking about the Avs D-Corps. But let's start right here off the top, Meghan. Nicole Hensley has her day with the Cup. Minnesota Frost go back-to-back. I guess just for you, like we spent a lot of time talking to her, just I thought it's just so awesome to see a Colorado athlete have the level of success that Nicole has. And then especially for her and her Minnesota teammates, like what a cool way to kick off the first couple of years of this brand new league.
I was in Minnesota a couple weeks ago, and this was huge bragging rights that I don't get to take much pride in, but everyone that's there is a huge Minnesota hockey fan. And so they were super excited to talk PWHL now with the reigning champs back-to-back years hailing from Minnesota with the Minnesota Frost. And I wanted to know too, like in a best of 7, a 4-1 win in a series is a gentleman's sweep. What is a 3-1 win in a best of 5 in the PWHL?
I want to say gentle lady, but that feels like too much of a mouthful.
And I think a ladies sweep just doesn't carry the same punch as gentlemen. So maybe just something.
A madam sweep.
Madam sweep. I like that a lot. Something royal too, a queen sweep.
Drop in the chat if you've got a good thought on this. Maybe we'll even have to put out like a poll later because I'm going to spend the rest of the day thinking about this now.
Yeah, but these women deserve a huge shout out. And a lot of OT games decide this championship this time around. So it wasn't an easy path to winning back the Walter Cup for the second year in a row for the Minnesota Frost. But I think it deserves a lot of credit where credit's due. This has just been a powerhouse of a team since they entered the league. I know it's pretty early, but it's been competitive year after year, and it hasn't been without adversity and a lot of fight from these women too. So really excited that they let us as Guerrilla Sports be a part of this really special day again.
Yeah. And, Megan, last year I had a scheduling conflict. Wasn't able to be part of it. So you kind of took the day. This year our roles were reversed. So I told Nicole, I was like, you guys have to three-peat so that Megan and I can finally line it up together. We do have a couple clips here from Nicole from this weekend. We were able to stop. She was able to stop in the studio. And we were able to chat a bit. And then we went up to the top of Pikes Peak and chatted there. But just a couple fun clips from her. We got a ton of content coming from this weekend. But let's start here.
Winning it at home this year, in some sense, to be able to stand on the ice, and I think we were around 13,000 people there for that game. And, when you win it away, like, people leave or stay, or it's, they're not cheering for you necessarily there. So to kind of have that experience at home now and just see the crazy crowd and the purple and how many people were there in general, and just, I feel like that experience, like, I did take a step back kind of on the ice to, like, take that in, because it was kind of like, this is what it looks like when, like, an NHL team wins the cup. Like, this is how it's supposed to look. You've got all the cameras lined up on the ice. You've got this big presentation with, like, the, not fireworks, but the whatever they're called. Yeah, those things going crazy, the confetti. Like, it all just looked how it's supposed to look. And that was, I think, really cool to, I don't know, in some ways I was, not that it wasn't real last year. We had a lot of those things last year, but it just being at home and that many people there, it was like, this is what it's supposed to feel like.
I 100%. And something else that I believe when we were in Ottawa talking, one of the things that you said was like, this has all been so crazy. 2 years ago, we were hoping that someone would give us tape, and now here we've got all this. And to your point, I had to imagine that the moment you're describing right there kind of ties into all of that. Like, man, I just wanted tape a few years ago, and now here we are with the cameras lined up and the confetti and the sparklers. I don't know what to call it.
Sparklers, maybe that's the word.
And just all that, and the fans and the jerseys. Like, I just can't imagine what that moment is like for not just you, but all of you guys. To just see where the game is at.
Yeah, I think it's really rewarding to see where the game's gotten to, and know that, like, it's going to continue to press forward, even when some of the founding members, as we all get a little bit older and start to retire, and know that, like, the next generation is set up to, come right into a pro league out of college and have that ability to develop, like, right in front of them. And it's just so cool to think where the game will be in 10, 15 years, to just, like, if you want something to get better, like, you have to put the resources into it. And now that those resources are there, it's just going to be like how far can the game go when the only thing women have to focus on is hockey.
How far will the game go when the only thing the women have to focus on is hockey? And I think that's been my favorite part of watching these first two seasons of the PWHL is it's a real unified league that has the backing and the support that the game finally deserves.
I think the appreciation too around the sport growing and demonstrating an appetite for more women's hockey, and the women's hockey that's here in front of us paved the way for 2 expansion teams. And it's great because after the last league did not work out, it did reduce the number of opportunities for women who wanted to play professional hockey. And so it went from being flush with so many more job openings, if you will, to being pretty limited. And I think it's starting to work its way back to opening up so many more routes for women who are, going D1 through college to now have somewhere to go afterwards. And I think what I love about that is it was hard when it happened, that it meant that there would be some women who would not have a landing spot. But in doing this the right way and trying to gradually build out the league as the appetite demands it, I think it's going to be more stable in the long run. And so that's why I'm excited to hear how excited Nicole was seeing their team covered with the seriousness of an NHL team, because it should command that kind of respect and that kind of coverage. And I think that the way that they're growing the PWHL, it might, be maybe a bit more gradual, a bit slower, but I think the results are proof of why it needed to happen this way. And seeing then the attendance just continue to go up and grow with the teams that are existing right now, and then obviously paving the way for expansion teams, it's exciting for the direction then that women's hockey is heading.
Well, and I love your point about them taking it slow and doing it the right way, because when you look at some of the leagues, because it's not just the PHWPA, which was the previous league, which I always felt was too many letters. That league maybe could have done better if they would have had one fewer letters. No, I'm just kidding. But your point about when the PWHL was announced and it was shrinking back, or not shrinking back down, but fewer teams, which meant there were going to be a lot of women who had teams before who suddenly didn't have teams because there just wasn't enough roster spots. Like you said, them slowing it down. One, the overall talent pool, like every team is good. That's something Nicole and I talked about a bunch, is, they've gone back to back, but like every season has been competitive. The point that you made, 4 overtimes in the final, like the games are so competitive. The margins are so thin. The teams are so good. And doing it this way, you're not going from this to this and suddenly the teams are really spaced out. You're still trying to get your footing as a new league. I think they're doing it the right way. And that was just something else that, again, like I talked with Nicole's folks over the weekend, of like getting to see this full progression of the way the league has gone. It's what gives all these players confidence. And to your point, like for Nicole to be able to sit there and say, yeah, this is the result of us doing it the right way. We're getting this fanfare, this coverage, this reaction, this type of crowd, because they're taking steps to do things the right way. And it's just been so fun to watch.
I feel I owe a little bit of a correction too for the Premier Hockey Federation, which came before the PWHL. It eventually grew to 7, its final season being in 2023, starting in 2015. So I guess getting up to 7 in that span isn't quite as rapid as I thought. But I still think that the expansion with the PWHL is happening as a result of the appetite for the sport. And so it's coming about in response to the attendance. And that's really important. I think
that's a great call out.
Appreciation for women's hockey has been there going back to the success of the national teams. And it's just been about finding the right way to leverage that then with these passionate audiences for women's hockey that do exist and have existed for a little bit, and just being able to tap into it the right way. So I think that's why too, the discussion around how they approached expansion is a worthy one. I think there's pros and cons. But I think that's why there's a lot of incentive from the PWHL to want to see the expansion teams have some success coming out the gate. And, that can add to the conversation then of what that means for the existing teams in the PWHL, and the maybe need for a little bit more parity, just because Minnesota winning back-to-back, it definitely draws a lot of attention then to where do these other teams need to get more competitive? And now you've got 2 new teams being introduced into the fold. But I think it's all good for the bottom line of growing the women's game.
I agree.
I can definitely understand some of the pros and cons, though, of the expansion draft, and that period of time, too, like ahead of the expansion draft.
This was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, where they had kind of first rights at some of the pending free agents. That's such an interesting way to do it. So there's certainly advantages then to Seattle and Vancouver coming into the PWHL next season, in addition to that expansion draft. But I hope they do take off running then out of the gate hot. I think that both of those places too are going to have insane passionate fan bases for those teams.
I completely agree. I mean, Seattle is already a hotbed for one. They've been starving for pro sports for so long, and it started to make its way back into that market, but they are such a women's sports hotbed as it is. I'm totally with you. I think those games are going to be nuts. Yeah, controversial expansion rules here. I do want to mention real quick, just by the way, the full sit-down interview with Nicole will be out tomorrow, and then we've got a whole bunch of content that will be coming your way over the next week, 2 weeks. Each team could only protect 3 players. And I think the point that you made about the PWHL wanting to see these teams come out of the gate hot, Seattle and Vancouver are the odds-on favorites to win the Walter Cup next year. So, like, to give people a sense of how that expansion draft went, they got really good rosters, but I think they don't want to see a dip in competitiveness in the league. Like, the games are so competitive. The games are so good. People are tuning in, not only in person, but on YouTube and in the local markets on cable. I think they wanted to make sure, like, we don't want to end up with a couple teams that go out there and get, whacked for 35 games next season.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that these new fan bases can jump right in and they can kind of continue the competitive nature that the league has had. And I love the call out of its expansion because that's what the fans have said they want, not just expansion to expand the league, which I feel like is sometimes what we saw in some of the past models of the women's pro leagues that didn't work out, is, catering to that audience and marketing the game the way that the PWHL is. And depending on where this league goes, how quickly, them giving their games away free on YouTube could end up being like one of the most innovative marketing tools we've seen in pro sports in a long time. It's made it accessible for everyone. I was telling Nicole, like, when we were, I believe it was game 2 when we were all in Dallas, the triple overtime cup final game going on PWHL. I said, you just saw iPads and laptops slow with every passing overtime period. More people were turning it on in the press box because it was crazy to watch. And I just think that was such a smart move for them to make it so accessible.
Yeah, I think that had played a huge part in it. I think too, just going back to the expectation around where Vancouver and Seattle can start with the way that they had the exclusive signing window and the expansion draft. The woman that they took from Minnesota was one I was surprised to see go. Vancouver ended up taking her, Denisa, and I remember loving watching her when they were here for the neutral site game because she plays with a little bit of an edge. She's kind of feisty, and so it's just surprising that of the limited players that they could even protect. It's clear to me that a very talented player is going to Vancouver just as part of this expansion draft. And so I imagine, that's just my more narrow lens for it. But I imagine the totality then of players that got plucked from their teams to make up now Vancouver and Seattle is a pretty talented and competitive group of women. That is exciting. And then the other thing is, we've been on shows before where we've talked about the sisters, the siblings of Avs players that we've wanted to see a path forward for some of these women.
I want you to hold that thought for 1 second. I just want to put a cherry on top of your point of Vancouver taking great players. Minnesota had 2 players that were up for Defender of the Year. Sophie Jacques and Claire Thompson, both with Vancouver now. So they loaded up. But I'm so happy you brought this up. Keep going.
Abby Newhook gets selected in this recent draft, and she gets to stay in Boston. So that full circle moment of playing in Boston for college and then getting drafted by the Boston Fleet is really wonderful. And there was a time where the future of hockey for Abby Newhook was uncertain. We didn't know how to talk about it. And we knew that she was such a talented player at the collegiate level that this was the hope that one day there would be a landing spot for her. And I'm just so glad that we get to sit here and have this conversation now about where Abby Newhook's hockey career will take her next.
Because at one point, we know for absolute certain Abby Newhook was preparing for life after hockey, after college. And when I saw her name called, I believe it was 2 weeks ago now, 2.5 weeks ago for the PWHL draft, I was so excited. Just, again, not because I'm a huge Boston Fleet fan or, whatever, but just
I am
what
now.
what it represents and exactly what you're talking about, Megan, is this is a real life example that you and I got to see firsthand go from great college hockey player that thought maybe that would be the end of the road to now a player that, the clip that we heard earlier from Nicole, will get to be part of that next generation that only has to worry about hockey. And I just think it's great. And I'm so glad you brought it up.
Yeah, I'm excited.
One last clip here from Nicole, then we'll jump on to Eagles. But this was from 14,000 feet above sea level, Megan, with the Walter Cup.
Yeah, we've got your parents and your family up here with us. Just what does it mean for you to not only share this moment with them, but to be able to take them along this journey? I'm sure people who sacrifice a lot for you to get to, bring a trophy like this home for them twice.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so much fun. Like, my parents were able to travel to both games and be at both championship games too. So it's just a lot of fun to get to spend a lot of time with them. And yeah, we got up, the 5 a.m. skates, the drives, the flights, the trips, the money, the gear, it takes a lot. We always say it takes a village to raise a hockey player. So to get to have both my parents and my grandmas up here has been a lot of fun. And then obviously looking forward to kind of doing a little party tonight at my parents' house to kind of just another way to say thank you just to everyone that's been there on the journey.
We talk about it all the time with what goes into young hockey players making it to the pinnacle. It was really special to be a part of that with Nicole and her parents and all that stuff. The last 2 years, Megan, we're very lucky here at Gorilla.
Yeah, and I was going to ask too, since Pikes Peak is kind of a tourist destination as it was, were there people up there who just happened to be
You're not going to believe what I tell you here. And we have all this footage and we'll post it later. We ran into two, they were together, diehard Minnesota Frost fans.
Oh my gosh.
One of them lived here in Colorado, but flew out for like 8 Minnesota Frost home games.
Yeah.
Then the other one lived in Chicago, same thing. And then they had the third member of their friend group who wasn't there with them is a Frost season ticket holder.
You're joking.
Dead serious. So we're walking, and there was a lot of people asking, like, "What's the trophy?"
That's what I was going to ask, and that's beautiful PR for the sport, for the women's league, right?
And people were so like they were so excited for Nicole when it was explained. But then suddenly we're walking, and this younger guy comes up and he goes, "Is that the Walter Cup?" And the conversation goes, he goes, "Are you Nicole Hensley? Oh my gosh, you're my favorite!" And it just like we were sitting there and it was unbelievable, like unbelievable that we ran into these two Minnesota Frost fans on the top of Pikes Peak.
That's incredible and proof of concept that this sport, this league very specifically, is gaining the recognition and the traction that it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not manufactured. Like, this is just real, authentic love of hockey that is catching on and spreading.
Yeah.
And it's crossing state lines. And that's what I love too about connecting with women like Nicole and being able to have more of a personal touch to her own story and her footprint in women's hockey, because then it connects people in Colorado to the Minnesota Frost.
Right.
And that's how you grow the game. It's a beautiful thing.
It's great. It's beautiful. And she's such a great ambassador for Colorado.
Totally.
Her and I talked a bunch just, on and off the record over the weekend about being from Colorado and getting to bring it back here. And she was at the Edge Ice Arena yesterday. And like you said, it crosses state lines, and that's great stuff to see. Let's hit it. Yeah, let's give it $1.99 from Vaguely Sober. There's a super chat, lights. Love to see it. No little man this year. We did have some champagne out of it instead, though.
Okay.
And then she ate some. There's donuts. There's a donut shop at the top of Pikes Peak.
Oh, nice.
And again, just if you follow Nicole on social media, this is gonna be another thing that just what are the odds? The donut of the week was a Reese's donut, and she's a massive Reese's peanut butter cup fan.
That's amazing.
So she got a bunch of donuts and ate them out of the cup and did a review on the Reese's donut.
I'm sure the Reese's got a high grade.
It did.
High
It
marks.
did. Yeah. It was.
That's
it was
so
solid.
awesome.
So no little man, but donuts this time around.
Yeah, you got to switch it up a little bit.
Got to change it up.
Was there still an oxygen bar at the top of Pikes Peak?
Chloe, did you see one? No, she searched around the visitor center more than I did. Yeah, I didn't see one, but it's thin up there for sure. Like we were all
well, and to hear her grandmas were up there, I was like, maybe they needed to hit the oxygen bar. Hopefully they didn't.
They were stationary a lot more than the rest of us, which was probably
take it easy. No, that's good. The air is very thin up there.
Very thin. Very thin. All that content is coming your guys' way here over the next week, 2 weeks. But the full sit-down interview with Nicole Hensley drops tomorrow morning. Let's shift gears here a bit, Megan. We're keeping it local in Colorado, but let's head up north to Loveland. The Colorado Eagles, this has been a busy summer for them. They lose Aaron Schneekloth to the Tampa Bay Lightning organization behind the bench. Nope, I got that backwards. They lost Dan Heinout to the Tampa Bay Lightning organization, and they lost Aaron Schneekloth.
Seattle.
Okay, yep. Point being, big changes behind the bench for the Colorado Eagles this summer, and then a hire today. So Mark Letestu, we talked about this last week on the show, is hired as the Colorado Eagles head coach. He comes from the Cleveland Monsters. Well, today they add Wheeling Naylor head coach Derek Army. Tim Army's son, former assistant coach for the Colorado Avalanche. Megan, I'm not going to expect that you are extremely well-versed on Derek Army's time with the Wheeling Nailers, but your thoughts on this hire?
No, I'm just kidding. But you'd be surprised in that I've had 2 different people DM me personally about what an amazing person and coach Derek Army is and how lucky Colorado is to have him. And a writer I'm a big fan of, we've only ever connected over the internet. So I haven't met her in person, but she covers the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I really hope I don't butcher her last name. I think it's Taylor Hasey.
Shout out Taylor.
Has covered the Pittsburgh Penguins, but a little bit the Wheeling Nailers. And she wrote an article on DK Pittsburgh Sports that has a lot of insight into Derek Army's time as a coach. He kind of climbed the ranks gradually, and she was one of the people who DM'd me with just a little bit more insight, and a lot of it's captured in this article too. But there was a notable shift around the team and the organization when Derek Army became the head coach. It was a notable shift in the enthusiasm that players had to be there. And she points out that at the East Coast level, this can be a challenging stage in a player's career because they are trying to climb the ranks of pro hockey and they want to be in the American League. They probably have distant NHL ambition in there somewhere too. And East Coast, it's not abundant with luxury and all the perks of playing professional hockey. And so it can be a little bit tough. And under Derek Army's coaching, they saw 62 players recalled to the AHL. And this team now has the winningest record in franchise history. And so this turnaround, not just in the observable shift in attitudes, but in the results, is marked. And I think it's exciting then to have another young voice. What I think is interesting about Letestu, Branham, and now Derek Army is that collection of men is pretty young for coaching. And so they bring a lot of interesting experience that can connect with younger players too, I think, in that kind of age makeup. So I'm super excited because between the DMs I'm getting about Derek Army just as a person being super involved in the community, this complete change in attitude and enthusiasm, I'm super excited then to see how that translates to this coaching group that's going to be behind the bench in Loveland next year, because I think Heinout had a really high energy, high vibes personality that added a lot to the Eagles leadership. And so I think that Derek Army is going to be a different sort of representation of that. Tim Branham, I don't want to undersell what he has meant to the Eagles the last couple of seasons. The top 10 special teams that they had this last year, that PK is run by Tim Branham. He oversees a lot of the defensemen. He kind of followed after Aaron Schneekloth was promoted to head coach. It was Schneekloth who oversaw the defensemen previously, then it became Branham. And I think that has just continued on a legacy of success with the defensemen and that defensive identity. And so then it's Mark Letestu then, who recently captured the North Division title back with the Cleveland Monsters. And they kind of had a turnaround. Like this last year maybe doesn't jump off the page in terms of their record, but I think they've been building towards a track record of improvement and success, going back to when they clinched that North Division title. So I'm just excited, if you can't tell, about this collection of men. I want to see each of them rewarded. You know, this is a promotion for each of them that they have earned in climbing the ranks throughout their coaching careers, and very excited to see all of the personal endorsements that are coming through for Derek Army in this hire.
Well, and it continues the, let's say, track record of the Avs organization trying to bring in high character individuals, whether it be coaches, staff, or right down to players. These are again individuals, because I don't want to say guys, because I'm thinking Kim Weiss as well. These are individuals who are very highly respected, very well thought of, connect well with other people, and this does, these hires that we've seen do seem to fall in line with all of that. That continued.
I'm glad you mentioned Kim Weiss, because something that maybe didn't get a huge shout out from this last season, her first year as video coach with the Eagles, is that she wore so many hats beyond just the role of a video coach. And you could just see in the social content that the Eagles would put out, there'd be little banter sometimes of her just kind of getting caught coming into the arena chirping players, and they're chirping her back. And so I think that Kim Weiss had that same background of connecting with younger players in her time leading up to this, that has translated to the work that she's doing with the Eagles this last year. So I think you're absolutely right to make mention of her too in this wonderful compilation of the coaching staff that is going to make up the team next year.
and like I said, I think that runs organization deep, I think that's what they strive for as much as possible.
Totally.
Some changes, Megan, at the you mentioned ECHL, AHL, there's a lot of turnover, not just from season to season, but even within each year. Some names that I know you're excited about coming back. We were on a show last week when Mark Sendin was re-signed, and you were like, I just want to make sure we shout out, like, that's a big returning name. But Gavin Brindley is added to the mix this year. I'm going to go as far to say Sean Behrens is added to the mix this year.
No, I agree. I view him in the same way.
Because, yes, he was on the roster last year, but he missed the entire season. I don't think that we're going to have any players from this year's draft make the immediate jump. But just kind of where you at with right now, knowing that it's July 14th and that there's still going to be some looks here that change, but Alex Barré-Boulet, added as well. We're going to get a full season of Cooper Gay, full season of Taylor McCarr, and TJ Tynan is brought back to fly around the rink as fast as anybody else out there.
My friend who's like newer to hockey, and so she's only seen a handful of games. She's the one who pointed out that Matt Steinberg wasn't in the final game against Abbotsford, and she wondered if that made a difference. And she also texted me as soon as TJ Tynan re-signed. She was so excited. She's like, it's an NHL contract. Like, what does that mean? Will he make the team next year? I was like, well, no, maybe not.
I feel bad, and I won't put on blast who I have a running joke with about TJ Tynan, but like when he gets into, when you watch him play an AHL game, you're like, oh, I see why this guy is so good here. TJ Tynan is the ultimate quadruple A player. He gets into NHL games, and his jersey is just constantly flapping in the wind behind him. He just doesn't really do a whole lot out there. But so I just always laugh that TJ
at the NHL level.
At the NHL level, absolutely.
Because he does a lot at the American League level. A
ton. Like I said, he's a quadruple A player through and through. But the kid can fly, no doubt about it.
Well, and so I'm excited that he'll be a part of the core going into next year, because between like a Jason Megna, Jacob McDonald, and a TJ Tynan, they lose a Matthew Phillips, who was a really important part of that top line mix for the Eagles. There's a couple other departures. Let's see. Jure Anala. Will also, Chris Wagner signed a different contract. And so it's important then to see.
Chris Wagner signed an AHL contract, which I still just find so interesting.
He's just going home. And, it's fine. Yeah. But that's the kind of turnover you come to expect at the American League level, but you still need, goal scorers, points producers. And so you can fill that need in different ways each year. The Eagles managed to do so, but they had a nice mix this last year. So that's why I'm excited to see TJ Tynan remain a part of it. But this paves the way too, like with a Jean-Luc Foudy not being qualified. He hits free agency. I'm not sure what the future holds for him. I personally feel he needs a clean slate. So there's still room for Jean-Luc Foudy to sign an AHL only deal with the Eagles. But I imagine a clean slate and a change of scenery is what's needed for Foudy. And that just opens up the opportunity then in the forward group for players like Cooper Gay and Taylor McCarr, who were able to make their debuts, but weren't able to regularly stay in the lineup in part because of opportunity. And so I'm excited to see then players like Nikita Proshepov and Ivan kind of climb the ranks in the top 6 and solidify themselves as options that can play up there, because the production will have to come at this level. That's just kind of a requirement. So I'm excited for a full year of that opportunity for players like McCarr and Cooper Gay, and then Sean Barron's on the back end. A very similar issue exists, and it's why too. Like, he'll be competing with Sage Weinstein.
We'll go with Stein.
It's Stein. Sage Weinstein on that back end, because there are going to be players like Jacob McDonald, Jack Ashawn, and Wyatt Ahmet that are still in that mix. I love those players. I love what they bring. There's going to be competition then on the Eagles back end for opportunity and for minutes. And Sean Barron's, as he's climbed the ranks of his hockey career, I will say in juniors, he had to compete for his spot in the end, but he's been the top guy. He's been the guy that quarterbacks a power play. He's not going to come in next year and just be the top guy. He's going to have to win it. And I'm excited for how that competition is going to bring out the best in some of these players.
All right. So I've got two questions, then we'll move on to the Avs D-core. One of them is relating to Eagles. The other one is AHL related. Both are about goalies. So Trent Miner, we are all fully expecting will be the guy in net going into next season. Maybe even throw the comment up here about from Alyssa about Nabokov. Ilya Nabokov is in town right now. He was posted a picture at the Avs facilities alongside Brent Burns,
who wasn't wearing shoes. Big barefoot shoes guy, probably. I know a person.
But Nabokov, even though he's got an ELC, he is on loan back to the KHL for this season. So he will not start the season in Loveland, which I actually think is good.
I do too.
However, that does leave open the possibility that when that season ends and the KHL does typically run a bit ahead of schedule versus the NHL and AHL, could we see Nabokov come over and take that net over from Trent Miner? I think is the question that, as we get near the end of the season, is going to be the question in a lot of people's heads. I guess just what are your thoughts? Where are you at on that? Or do you hope that by the time that's all ending, you're heading into playoffs and you bring him in to be the third for the Avs and just spend time around the organization and NHL level? Or do you think that Trent Miner really, really has to solidify himself to not lose that net come the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think he does need to solidify himself, but he signs the 2-year extension with the Avs. I think that shows a little bit of faith in him having opportunity, especially in this next year, because they haven't really brought in anybody that you're looking at is going to be taking the job from Trent Miner. Like they signed Kyle Kaiser to an AHL deal earlier in July. And so that's just another guy that you're viewing as kind of depth in the goaltending chart. Adam Scheel will be up for a new contract. Like he's a UFA come this July. So that's somebody that I could see them having interest in remaining a part of the organization that they just haven't signed yet. But all that to say, none of those names are jumping off as guys that are going to take Trent Miner's job in this next season. So I think the full faith is in Trent Miner as the starter for this year. And with goaltending, I think it's tricky too to have a guy come in late and steal a job from somebody after someone like Trent Miner will have had most of that regular season to establish himself and build trust with his teammates. So I don't know that I'd realistically see Nabokov coming over and just taking that net from him ahead of the playoffs for the Eagles. But it is.
I guess it also depends on what kind of year Nabokov has as well.
It totally does. So, I'm not ruling anything out. I think it is more unlikely for him to come and just take the net in the middle of this upcoming season. But I do think it's important for him to get around the organization as much as possible. And so with him being here for training camp and getting a better feel for the staff and also some of the players, I think that's huge for his development. And so I think him coming over at the end of the year makes a lot of sense, whether it be the third goalie and exposed to the Avs around the playoffs and around coaching staff generally, I think makes a ton of sense. But
especially depending on how deep is his KHL run, like, do you want to just let him come be around it and not necessarily have to play through another playoff run?
In the same way that we want professional women in the professional women's league to just worry about the hockey, I just want Nabokov to worry about his KHL season and ride out the full extent of it. And then in coming here, I don't think there should be the expectation for him to just take the net from Trent Miner. Then I think there is very fair expectation though that it's his to lose the next year. And Trent Miner, then this is the case he's building to. Well, can we do a shared starts kind of thing? You know, can we split them? But from a development perspective, you do want the young goaltender getting into the rhythm. And honestly, I look at Justus Annanen's trajectory, and he got the bulk of starts, but it was still pretty split, especially when he first started making that transition, adjusting to North American ice. They did ease him into it with a more veteran goalie alongside him. So it'll be a bit different if it's Trent Miner and Nabokov that they're doing this kind of a tandem with. But it might not be the worst thing that Nabokov doesn't come out the gate getting every start in the AHL that first year through, and to kind of, you know, give him a little bit of time to get adjusted then to North American ice. Yeah,
because like you said, this is the, if you want to call it political side of hockey, he's not coming over to be a backup next season. You know what I mean? So to your point, like I think that expectation is that he's the Eagles' number one guy. So big pressure on Trent Miner this year to come and, you know, say, hey, no, I'm an AHL starting goalie.
You know what I find super interesting, though, is Artur Shilovs and then Danil Tarasov. Like, two young goaltenders that I put so much more value on. And then when the trade is said and done, I thought the return was just maybe a little less than I thought it would be for Shilovs and Tarasov, like previously. And I think for Shilovs in particular.
This was my next question, by the way. So if you want to just go into a little bit about Shilovs.
Where I'm going with this is it's really hard to project goaltenders. And so I think even with Nabokov, it is really hard to say with certainty what he's going to look like even a year from now and what that means then realistically in terms of taking the net from Trent Miner.
I feel like I'm upsetting Megan about talking about putting a goalie in front of Trent Miner.
No, it's not upsetting. I just think that I'm so quick to, you know, pick the goalie that I think has the highest upside, and that would be Nabokov. But I actually don't know, especially in seeing what has happened with Shilovs. I don't know that it is that simple in the eyes of an organization and in evaluating the development of a goaltender. I think you peel the layers back and you even look at how long it took for Dustin Wolf to get real opportunity in Calgary, and even how long it took for Lukas Dostal to earn trust in Anaheim. It is interesting to me then what has happened with Shilovs as a young goaltender with, you know, a few behind a Thatcher Demko whose health has been in question with Vancouver, that it seems interesting to me that the young goalie with high upside that has been a bit shaky at the NHL level, but has really held it down at the AHL level and then in past Worlds competitions. Like Shilovs has really demonstrated he can handle himself on those stages where the pressure
good NHL playoffs last year
is intense. Well, it was like a high, it's like a high and a low. Not his fault at all. But then he lost the net at the start of that next year to Kevin Lankinen. And so I think that's where the trust was lost, is he couldn't be consistent at the NHL level. And so the task at hand was to go be consistent at the American League level. He has a lights out Calder Cup playoff run, 5 shutouts, 1 away from making an AHL record, and is MVP of the Calder Cup playoffs. So like Shilovs did everything he possibly could, you know, everything that was asked of him. His numbers were
ridiculous too.
To solidify, like, hey, I know you need a consistency from me. All right, here's my body of work this last year. And so again, there's not really much more he could have done. And so to me, it felt like his stock was kind of low when you look at the value of the trade compared to how I personally interpreted it after what was asked of him and the year that he had. All that to say, I think you got to be careful with goalies. You got to be careful in evaluating young goalies and projecting where they might be one day. It's really an only time will tell kind of thing. You evaluate in the moment. And so that's where I just need to see Nabokov a year from now to really honestly tell you if I think he's taking the net from Trent Miner. And I hope he does, because the Avs hope he does.
See, the only thing that I don't even necessarily know if this is me disagreeing with you, is I just think that a player coming from the KHL, a Russian player from the KHL, it's a lot more delicate of a process. And I just think that there has to be some
it's true, because
guarantees.
With exception, like it's not exclusive to goalies, but
Right.
they've lost prospects that have had expectation they'll come over to North America and be given opportunity.
Yeah, a wink, handshake agreement type thing.
And it's felt like the patience threshold for these players is pretty thin, pretty low. Like if they're not seeing the opportunity immediately in front of them, they will not hesitate just to return back. And so, no, I think you're right. It's a delicate situation.
Yeah.
But it really falls on what Nabokov is a year from now.
Totally. Yeah.
And I know that sounds like such an obvious thing, but I need you to know I mean it at every level. Goalies are so hard to predict. You just kind of got to see what they are in the moment, in the present.
It's also it's easily the slowest development track.
Totally.
With extremely rare exceptions. It's I remember seeing a lot of people being confused when the Avs gave Blackwood the 5-year extension last year. It's like, no. If everything goes exactly right with Nabokov, that is exactly the timeline. 6 years from last year. Like you'd ideally want to see him have a great year in the KHL, come over, whatever he does at the end of this year. I don't really care. I don't really think it matters. Then you want to see him win the AHL starting job next year, and then be the AHL starter for another full year. And then you start, then Wedgwood's deal is up, and then you maybe start getting him in as the backup. Like, yeah, six years sounds about right. So you are totally right. Goaltenders are far from a black and white. He's going to be good. He's not going to be good. There's a lot of gray in there.
I left out on the back end conversation for the Eagles too. I talked about the kind of mainstay guys that you expect to be at least, in the top pair, second pair roles between Wyatt Ahmet, Jack Ashon, Jacob McDonald. But there's some of those young guys not so different from the Cooper Gay track. On the defensive side, you've got Hank Kempf and Connor Kelly also vying for opportunities. And then Ronnie Attard, that right-handed defenseman that came up through the Flyers organization that a lot of people wondered about. That's going to be just another name in the mix competing for a job on the back end. And so that will make the task at hand for Sean Behrens that much more challenging. But I'm excited because I kind of like all of these players. So, I don't think I'll be disappointed in the end unless something goes terribly wrong with Sean Behrens.
Don't tell Megan this prospect pipeline is empty. A lot to be excited about and love, and we'll keep on top of that as we move through the summer. Megan, let's get into what we're kicking off a series. Whatever. I don't know the right way to say it.
You're right. How do we do this since we've done so much time on the Colorado Eagles? Sorry.
We're just gonna get into it.
Perfect.
Because again, I still do think when we're going through, diving into where the Avs are at, I think it's going to change between right now, July 14th, and let's say, September 1st, Nathan McKinnon's birthday, right? Right before camp opens. I think we're going to be talking about different looks, different groups. And I think it's also going to give us more certainty on what we're about to talk about here, because we're going to talk about this Avs D-core as it stands right now. And it's actually a group that I'm excited about, but I don't know if we can say, yeah, write those guys' names in pen. I still think there's a chance we see some shuffling, some moving around, and that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about right here. So if the season started today, Megan, the Colorado Avalanche would be hitting the ice with a D-core that looks some version of Devon Toews, Cale Makar, Sam Girard, Josh Manson, Brent Burns, Sam Malinsky. That's a double righty pair there on your third pair. But to me, that is a mix of, you got some youth in there. You got some experience. You've got 3 Norris trophies. You got some mean physicality in Josh Manson. You got some really well-rounded defensemen in Cale Makar, Devon Toews. I think there's a lot to like about the way this group is currently put together. And I think there's plenty of reason to say, yeah, the Avs should go into the season with this being the group.
I think what I have found interesting is, one, I agree. I'm leaning pretty positively around the construction of the decor presently, but I'm also maybe challenging myself a little bit because it's not so different from how the season ended, right? I think the biggest difference is swapping Ryan Lindgren for Brent Burns. And so obviously Erik Johnson is still in that picture, but I don't think the presumed loss of Erik Johnson is going to alter the look of this decor that drastically. And so similarly to like somewhere in there is Keaton Middleton as kind of the extra guy on the outskirts. And again, it's not like totally moving the needle on how I feel about it any differently.
Right.
I think maybe from a depth perspective, that would concern me a little bit. I think as far as that extra guy, I maybe want someone ahead of Keaton Middleton in the depth chart.
Totally with you.
Not a deal breaker. I don't know. Maybe they're eyeing Ronnie Attard for that. Like his physicality and his model of defenseman is a bit different from the puck moving kind of guy that they have. So maybe that's a guy that they're eyeing for a depth role in the chart for the back end. But anyways, not really a big deal in my eyes. They'll figure that out. That'll come together. So, does Brent Burns then really move the needle differently from Ryan Lindgren? And I guess that's the question I need to answer.
Differently, I think, is the key word now. I think they move the needle in different ways.
Well, and honestly, I was never crazy about Ryan Lindgren. I liked him, and I thought he did what I thought he was going to do just fine.
Okay, I guess you kind of understand that. Let's pause. Did you have any, because when the conversation was around them potentially bringing him back, I saw some people that were like, no, you can't bring I'm like, what were you watching different
what
from
did
me?
He do to you?
Right. I mean, honestly.
Is he in your neighborhood? Did your dogs beef at the dog park? Like, what happened here?
Did his dogs poop in your yard? Did he not pick it up? Like, I am definitely not saying like he was oh man, you had to bring him back. I thought he was fine.
I liked him.
Right.
I thought he was fine. What he brought, it was a little bit different from the puck moving guys. It wasn't the physicality of Josh Manson, but he did still sacrifice the body to block shots. And so the defensive side of his game was very sound and very consistent. And I appreciated that. So
the odd mistake, but who's immune from that?
Right. And they were pretty limited, all things considered. I think every player this actually put an asterisk or a pin by. This is an interesting conversation that's also been running through my head. But anyways, all that to say, what Ryan Lindgren added to the Avs back end, I thought was necessary and important, but I also didn't think it was this huge dramatic impact. Doesn't have to be a dramatic impact to be important, though. So that's why I was fine with the possibility of him staying in Colorado, not for the amount of money that he ended up signing in Seattle for. So that's where I find myself in then measuring the Brent Burns addition in his place. Like, okay, the money makes a lot more sense. And the way it's built out makes a lot more sense in terms of it being around his availability, which probably isn't a concern given the Ironman record. But I like that it's attached to that because this is still a 40-year-old player. And so Brent Burns, I think, when you look at the issue of scoring with the whole of the Avs team through the first round of the playoffs, I looked at the criticism around Cale Makar and just maybe not quite looking like himself for a lot of that series because Dallas had his number and knew how to contain him. And I think about how there are those puck-moving guys on the back end that you want to see be more of an offensive threat when this is clearly an issue for the team. And so I look at Brent Burns as kind of an answer to some of that, like a little bit of built-in insurance than to just add another guy who has such an offensive mind for the game. I think his size is interesting too because he's not a physical player, but when you look at
he reminds me of Mikko
taking up lanes and just using your sheer body positioning to do that, I do think size actually can still be helpful even if he's not so conscious to how he's leveraging it. I still think there's value in that. I'm not going, I'll stop short of saying he's a physical player, but I think that there are ways that he can leverage his size in a positive way that isn't really captured otherwise in the decor outside of Josh Manson, who uses his size differently, but importantly.
Well, and I think maybe an example of exactly what you're talking about is how good of a penalty killer Brent Burns is.
He can reliably eat up significant minutes.
Yeah.
And he can hold himself to top matchups. So what I found interesting too was there's a report recently about why Carolina didn't continue on with Brent Burns. And it sounds like Brent Burns' side of things wanted assurance of continued opportunity and ice time. And going into the season at 40 years old, I found that a little bit interesting of an ask, because I imagine in Colorado, that's not exactly what will be offered to him behind Makar and Taves, but it indicates to me there will be no shortage of opportunity for him.
Well, and it sounds, I mean, by every account, I think he's going to fit in really well culture-wise. Apparently, this guy is just like a
huge beauty.
Well, yes, but just like a work horse in the gym, constantly, always taking care of his body, really watching what he's eating. So, like, I actually, like, if I was the Avs and I heard that was part of their thing of like, no, he wants more opportunity, I'd be like, cool. At 40 years old, you still have that drive for like, no, I want more. I want more opportunity. And I believe Elliot Friedman talked about, in that same vein of what you're mentioning of, there is a pride thing with that too. We're like, well, I don't want to be demoted on my team. So let me go to this D-core that maybe I think is, better, deeper. This team's,
right.
Whatever.
I can stomach a demotion if it's because Cale Makar and Devon Taves are ahead of me.
Exactly. And so again, like I think there is, the more that I hear about, how things broke down in Carolina, how he ended up in Colorado, I think this is a really good partnership between the Avs and Brent Burns. Like, I think it's two sides that have a very shared vision. And I think it's going to work well. And I like your call out about, hey, want to make sure we've got that punch on the back end, because how many times have you and I talked about it? We talked about it with JJ. The Avs go as their D-core goes. When Cale Makar, Devon Taves are playing well, they're moving pucks up the ice quickly. They're playing sound in their own zone. It leads to that transition game. It allows the Avs to get to their offense quickly. I think the Avs D-core is such an important part of their identity under Jared Bednar. And I think that was a great call out of let's make sure that we've got this veteran offensive punch to maybe play next to Sam Malinsky and help shepherd him through this, a bit, a player that maybe plays a little bit similar.
You know what I think is interesting too is we around the organization heard feedback that perhaps there were points where Taves and Makar could have been separated to better distribute the offensive threat among the D pairs. And I think this is really interesting then with the addition of Brent Burns. It's just another option to maybe give comfort to. You don't have to have Taves and Makar attached to one another. Maybe we can diversify the threat on the back end by adding a Brent Burns into that rotation so that feels like a more comfortable possibility. If we find ourselves getting shut down with a Makar Taves pairing, because I don't think that's necessarily a demerit of those two players. I think that maybe separated from one another, there was this possibility there could have been a different, better threat. Better in that it would be harder for Dallas to counter because it's different.
Could you put, you get into that situation, could you put Devon Taves with Brent Burns, and then, Cale Makar can play with anybody, out there with Sam Girard or... And
honestly, I've seen an interest in Taves Malinsky.
Going
back to like pairings that I've seen Bednar go back to and try, I think there's an interest in trying to see if he can get that to work. Not as a permanent full-time thing. Again, this is just, they're looking for break glass in case of emergency if they find themselves in the position that they did with Dallas.
I really do look at Sam Malinsky as, I'll put a couple, Diet Cale Makar light.
I see no need for asterisks. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Right. Diet and light had to get in there, but we all get the point. The way he moves, laterally, his ability to get pucks through. Sam Malinsky has an absolute bomb that does not get talked about anywhere nearly enough. The dude scored like 7 goals last year, and I think 6 of them were like back bar and out. He's a great shooter. He's got great vision. And he told you and I last year, a big part of the reason I picked Colorado Avalanche was to play with Cale Makar. It's clearly a player that he models after, and we see how well it works with Devon Taves and Cale Makar. I think that's really interesting. Get Devon Taves with Sam Malinsky a little bit more. But I think that's a great call out, Megan, because that is something that we heard, that they maybe wanted to see some more shakeup when things got tight. And this definitely gives you some options.
Yeah, some trusted options, because this is where I feel sympathy for the position Malinsky's in. I think Jared Bednar, historically, it takes a lot for him to earn trust, or give trust, I should say, to younger players. And Malinsky will be turning 27.
Can't win with kids.
He's not exactly a young player, but he is newer to the league. And it shows in experience and sometimes the type of mistakes that he makes. And this was the thing that I put an asterisk by or a pin by earlier, because it's been in my brain a lot lately that when he makes mistakes, the nature of the mistake isn't necessarily so different from mistakes I've seen other players make. Players like Josh Manson, who, kind of had a high giveaways per 60 in these last playoffs, but also had some pretty exciting moments in being a difference maker in that first round as well. So what made Malinsky's mistakes that took him out of a couple games so much different? And I think it's actually not a poor reflection of Malinsky, but rather where they'd like to get him to. I think that it actually shows a vote of confidence in what they'd like to mold him into in the future, and where they see his ceiling down the line. And so I think having kind of an extreme response to some of the mistakes, like the benching that happened in the regular season, his play hadn't actually dipped that low. It was just low comparatively to how he started the year.
Right.
It had just stagnated. And so he wasn't like this defensive liability every night. He just wasn't being the difference maker that he was when he started. He was playing a lot hungrier at the start of the year. So where I'm going with this is, I don't think that when Malinsky gets sat a game or has some limited minutes, that it's necessarily a punishment for this player, even though it feels like, well, the mistake that he just made really isn't weighted so differently from the mistake that his teammates have made. But I think that they want to teach these mistakes out of his game now.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was going to say was, and I don't know, maybe saying that they're weighted different is the right, like, he's graded on a curve when other people, or maybe others are graded on a curve. Sam Malinsky isn't yet, because he's having to earn that trust, build up Jared Bednar's confidence in Sam Malinsky. And I think it went a massive way that what you're talking about, where, the mistakes he was making, not only the mistakes that he was making, but where they were coming, at what moments in the game they're coming. You have what was it, 2-week stretch where he really, wasn't getting in the lineup. He was having a hard time sticking. You hit that Four Nations break, and the way he came out of that, I think probably earned him a lot of grace with Jared Bednar to say, hey, I was able to take everything, the struggles, the feedback, the moments when I did well and maybe wasn't rewarded in the way that some other players were, or, mistakes that were maybe graded a little bit more harshly than other players were. I was able to take all of that, compartmentalize it, put it away, learn from it, and then come out of that break and take my game to another level. That shows great emotional maturity. That shows maturity in your game. And his talent and ability, I thought, shined through in a way that it did even more so than earlier in the season.
Yeah.
But more closely reflecting the 20-ish, 23 games that he got the previous season, where I was sitting there going, how do you keep this kid off the roster?
Right.
He's jumping in offensively. He's making things happen. He's moving the puck north. That was where I honestly felt like his back half of the season was more closely in line with like the kid that we saw now 2 seasons ago, who was playing fast, loose, and extinct, off of instinct, just trying to make an impact.
And that kid in the first year was prone to some mistakes.
Sure.
I think the version that came out of Four Nations was so much more polished. And that's by design from my perspective. It's, sometimes it feels like the punishment doesn't always fit the crime, but it's because I think the organization has higher expectation for him. Truthfully.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard then. It's like, well, I just saw this guy make a similar caliber of mistake, but we expect more from you. And so that's what I think is happening to his game. And the path ahead for him is going to be a little bit challenging to continue to earn minutes and opportunity.
But I think that's good.
I think it is good, well, especially looking at the player coming out of the Four Nations break.
Yeah.
It inspired much even better play than before. And again, I don't think it was bad before. I just think that it had kind of plateaued. And it was a way of getting more and better out of this player. Because at this point, I think I'm pretty fluent in Bednar speak. And the way that he speaks about Malinsky is a coach that has a lot of belief in this player. I know sometimes the way he gets utilized, it feels like, oh, he doesn't trust him. I think there's a lot more trust there, and that sometimes the way these mistakes get addressed and handled doesn't always reflect it, but I actually think we're just interpreting it all wrong.
And not to mention, we mentioned with Brent Burns earlier, this having an impact on him. Like, there's a safety blanket there for Jared Bednar in number 7 and number 8. And it is hard not to go to that when you see a player that's making mistakes. But just putting a bow on what you were saying about, the expectations are high for a player like Malinsky. We know the organization is really high on this player. And again, just to like the point of like, yeah, the expectations and the standards that you're held to are a little bit different. We know Josh Manson is a full-time NHL defenseman, and we know what he's capable of. So when there's a mistake, we know that he's, better than that. We're still getting there with Sam Malinsky, if you're the organization, of knowing that this guy is a set and forget NHL player, and he's got to work through this stuff. And like you said, he's got to learn from those mistakes. And that's what I think he showed the most growth on this past season, was being able to take not his best game and come out of that playing maybe the best hockey of his career so far.
Well, and I thought that he was still kind of on a short-ish leash in the playoffs. And so what I think is interesting too is when you dig into some of the numbers, despite playing fewer games, things like hits and blocks still come in at a pretty high number per 60, and especially considering he was utilized in maybe more limited ice time on a nightly basis. I found it really interesting then that the impact of his game physically had also taken a small step forward, because I don't think it's something that we talked about. I think people were even critical of the overall physicality of the Avs coming out of that first round series. But I think day by day, you're getting a better player out of Sam Malinsky. And it just needs to continue to be rewarded with the opportunity as appropriate, as necessary, because you're absolutely right. We know what Josh Manson at 33 years old is in the NHL today. We don't know what Sam Malinsky is in the NHL tomorrow. And it is important then for him to continue to be pushed as a player. And that's what I really hope this next year is for him, because I think he can be an important ingredient on the back end and more of a difference maker. In the way that I was talking about Lindgren kind of being this fine player who didn't necessarily drastically change the complexion of the decor, I think Malinsky is a player that can.
I'm going to lob something at you here. That's crazy.
You better not trade Sean Barons.
No.
Sam Malinsky.
No. This is way more
perfect.
Versus Bowen Byram.
I don't know. Hold on.
No. I'm not saying he's better, but like
that's gonna be hard
with where they fit in the Avs lineup. And I'm thinking back to like where Bo was when he was last in Denver. Like, I don't think it is crazy at all to say, could Sam Malinsky play a Bowen Byram role?
Well, and what's interesting is I think Sam Malinsky is mentally tougher to better ascend to that role than Byram was. Because
he's a little bit better well-rounded too.
I think defensively, it's being pushed too, and I think he's meeting that with execution. But with Byram, that's what I think the issue was not an identity crisis with Byram to himself, but rather the role he felt he deserved and wanted, and the role that was available to him. And I think Byram struggled to reconcile that in taking the feedback and wearing maybe what felt like a role that was a little less than he'd like to be playing in that moment, for example. I think he didn't wear that as well as Malinsky has worn the nights off, the nights from the press box. That has to be a difficult pill to swallow. And I think the reaction from both those players in terms of utilization is different. And it's mentally tougher on behalf of Malinsky.
Like I said, I'm definitely going to stop shy of saying I'd take Sam Malinsky over Bowen Byram, but I do think that this should be maybe, because that's one part that we hear a lot of folks talk about still. When they discussed the 2022 team was like, oh, we had Bowen Byram as the secret weapon on the back end. You mentioned Brent Burns earlier, Sam Malinsky. Can you start to recreate some of that? And
I love this example because Byram was not trusted until it became a necessity because of injuries. And so, not that I want to see anybody get injury to pave way for opportunity, but I do think that the secret to getting the most out of all of your players is to reward them with opportunity periodically.
Yeah. So like I said, I just wanted to throw that out there because I do think it
is interesting how they are different as players and why what Malinsky is might make a lot more sense for that role than Byram.
Exactly. All right, and then we're gonna wrap it up with this. Talking about Cale Makar, Devon Taves. I want to focus on Cale in particular because I also don't. I think if you go back and rewatch the games and look at it analytically, Cale Makar had a stupid amount of chances in the Dallas series.
Yeah.
He just couldn't get any to go, but it was obvious they had keyed in on him. He plays heavy minutes throughout the season. I am really curious to see how Brent Burns, in particular, as now this third guy that can just eat minutes, especially in the penalty kill, how much can you leverage that to take some of the pressure off of a guy like Cale Makar? Yeah, he's probably still going to kill penalties for you. He's still going to play in all situations. But can you take a couple of his PKing minutes off each game and divert them somewhere else? Can Brent Burns quarterbacking a PP2 give you some more confidence in a second unit and maybe shave 30 seconds off of what you're rolling, PP1 out there for, especially with the success that we saw the Florida Panthers have by working both of their power play units. I'm fascinated to see what type of impact, and I also wonder how much it went into the decision making of bringing in a guy like Brent Burns, who can eat heavy PK minutes, to help relieve the pressure on Cale Makar a bit.
I imagine the PK thing is huge. Well, especially given the Dallas series, Dallas's power play was converting stupid crazy.
Nuts.
And so I don't know that it's like, Brent Burns could have prevented this,
Right.
But I do think that when you're trying to manage Cale Makar's ice time, that is probably the guy you trust the most to be out on significant minutes for the PK. And you probably find yourself feeling left with no other choice. But with a Brent Burns as a choice, a guy who can reliably take up some of those minutes, you maybe build a comfort with him there too, as just another option to help shave that off. And hopefully we never find ourselves in the same room with Dallas's power play being stupid crazy like that again. It obviously wasn't sustainable, as we know now in hindsight. And there were lessons to be learned on Colorado's PK as well that weren't quite up to snuff either. But some of it was just a bit of an anomaly. So I think Brent Burns being added there is just more insurance to bolster the PK.
Another leader for that group as well.
Completely. Because I think, Manson represents a pretty big leader on the PK as well. Another defenseman who can eat up big minutes. But I think taking some of that pressure off of Cale, and maybe even, it's redirected to time spent on the power play. Maybe there's more of a comfort in utilizing him there and riding that top unit pretty hard, as they always do. But I love this idea of giving the second unit a chance until it doesn't, until it doesn't work. You see that it's just not working. But all in all, I think that the addition of Brent Burns has an impact on the year that Cale Makar can have, because I think when you unchain him from the burdens of both special teams and being the only guy that can help in those situations, that opens him up to be more Cale Makar 5v5. And they needed him to be more Cale Makar 5v5. And look, it wasn't at, what's the word? It wasn't like he wasn't trying in these playoffs. You're right. When you look at the analytics, he was being shut down in so many different ways. But I think Brent Burns gives him the opportunity to be even more like himself.
Yeah, no, I agree. And maybe that's going to be the biggest boost for Brent Burns.
Which is super different now. And going back to my Ryan Lindgren question of, is this really so different? That will be a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today. We're going to continue to, as we get into the offseason, we're going to deep dive on what's going on with the Avs as they currently sit right now. Then, like we said, we'll get through August, and then we'll revisit it right before training camp starts with, okay, we talked about it in July. Now, where are we in August? D, forwards, goaltending. But yeah, Megan, I'm folks in the chat are right. The Avs are not there yet. The roster that they've got built right now, there is still work to do. But like you and I said last week, the great news is your roster doesn't have to be finalized until March. So I think the Avs have a really nice foundation. Anxious to see where they end up. Anything else?
No.
That's it. That's it for today. Keep an eye out, guys. Tomorrow we will have the full Nicole Hensley interview dropping, and then content coming from our day with her and the Walter Cup dropping all week. And then we are, like you said, we are in the off season here. So last week, this week, probably still going to be a little bit of us feeling it out. But then we're coming up on the time here rapidly, Megan, where we're going to be rolling out our 25-26 season content plan and show plan and all that good stuff. So exciting times. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. We got Chloe Thiel behind the glass today. That's going to do it. We'll talk to you guys next time. This is Gorilla Sports.
Bye.
Off Ice. See ya.